Marion. Awesome. Thank you, Laura. All right, we're recording. There were a few folks who couldn't make it today, and we wanted to make this available to folks later. So welcome to our local work group meeting. Do this every year. This is the first time we've been back in person, I think, since the pandemic. Yeah, so it's nice to see all of you. Thanks for making it. If folks online can put their name and affiliation in the chat, that'll help us keep track of who's here. And then I've got a attendance sheet circling around here, so please make sure you get your name on it. Just logistics here. Hopefully everyone found the restrooms just down the hall. There's hot water in the back and some snacks if you want to grab those. Oh, and I'm frozen. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Huh. A little hard to see with the.
You can move the Zoom part. People.
Maybe to the left.
Yeah, move it to
Like the top of it.
Oh. That's not what I meant to do. Sorry, guys. All right. Here we go again. Huh. And now I lost it.
He said it closed that window.
Oh, it did. Good. Okay. Sorry.
It's down at the bottom. He's down at the bottom. You just click it. Yeah. And then you go back to your share. Share your entire screen at the bottom there, at the bottom right, where it says share in blue. Or you can choose just the PowerPoint.
On the bottom right.
Yeah, down. See that blue share button?
Oh, just share the.
Yeah, just sharing it'll just be your screen at all.
Okay, maybe that'll work better. All right, sorry. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. Oh. It's just gonna be covered up a little bit, but hopefully that works. Everybody can hear me okay if I just stay sitting here?
Yeah,
Right.
it'll track you. And then you have someone waiting that.
Okay.
Do you actually want, I can probably manage with that if you want, so you don't have to worry about it while you're talking stuff.
I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
Hopefully we got it going now.
All right, if you want help.
All right. So I have Lauren Bennett, our public affairs specialist, online helping facilitate the Zoom folks, and she'll cut in hopefully if there's any questions or chat happening online. So just a brief overview of our agenda. I'm trying to keep it to, oh, that clock's going to keep on throwing me off. I'm not going to look up there. Keep it to an hour and a half today. We're just going to go over some updates on activities that we've been doing over the last year and new programs that NRCS has. Seth is going to give an update on the Siuslaw Soil and Water Conservation District activities for the last year. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time on looking at future priorities, getting some feedback from all of you on what resources, what concerns you have, so that we can feed that into our strategic plan that we're going to be updating in the next year or so. And we'll have a little time for round robin, any updates that you guys want to give to the group. All right, so the local work group meetings, this process is mandated for us to have these local work group meetings every year. And the idea here is that we have funding through farm bills from Congress, and that kind of sets the programs that we have to work with. But the way we actually deliver those programs on the ground is really led by what resource concerns we have and what local partners and landowners want to see us doing. And so that's where our main partnership is with soil and water conservation districts all across the country, making sure that we're working with you, who are landowner led also, to focus our efforts. So we're gonna do a few things in our meeting today. We're sharing updates on what we've been doing, but we want to make sure that we're listening and gathering input from you all on what's important, what you'd like to see happening. Are there emerging issues that we should be addressing? And just kind of a check in to see how we've been doing and if you have any feedback on that. And I like these meetings to be a chance for you all to connect with each other, share ideas, resources, and see how we can collaborate. So those who have attended these meetings in the past, this is kind of a recycled slide, but I like to go through this because our programs are really confusing. There's a lot of acronyms. It's a lot to keep track of. So I just want to kind of do a brief overview of what programs we're working with. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program is one of our main funding programs. It's in Oregon. We deliver this money through locally led conservation implementation strategies. And we'll go into the ones that we have in this area right now. But we also have national initiatives, including the High Tunnel Initiative, Organic, and the Organic Transition Initiative that was a new one this last year. And just starting last year, we have a lot of funding from the Inflation Reduction Act. And so that was money authorized by Congress that's coming to NRCS and then filtering down through several of our programs, including EQIP. But we're also getting money into the Conservation Stewardship Program, our easements programs, and our CPP through that. EQIP conservation incentives contracts are a program that started maybe 4 years ago, and it's sort of meant to be a stepping stone. It's sort of halfway in between the traditional EQIP, which is just practices that you get paid for as soon as you get to implement them. These are 5-year contracts where you have annual payments and then you can have practices too. And then the Conservation Stewardship Program is really for folks who have like a history of stewardship on their land already. They've already been doing some conservation work. And so this program pays annual payments for maintaining that base level of conservation, but then you can do enhancements on top of that to kind of bring the conservation up to the next level. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP, is actually a program of our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, but we provide some technical assistance on those along with other local partner groups. And this provides annual rental payments to take marginal pasture land out of production and restore it. So it's on streams and wetlands, basically doing stream planting, fencing livestock out, and it's a 10 or 15-year contract to just let those trees grow and provide the water quality and wildlife habitat benefits. And then the last one here is our easement program. And there's a couple things that fall into that. The ones I'll talk about are the wetland reserve easements and healthy forest reserve program. And basically these are meant to restore, enhance, and protect wetlands or forest through these conservation easements that can be 30-year easements for wetland reserve or permanent. And the Healthy Forest Reserve Program are permanent easements. And then 2 other programs that, that's kind of annoying having the picture in the way, sorry. Hopefully you can kind of get the idea. 2 other programs that we haven't been using in this area, but that are available nationally and other parts of the state have been taking advantage of them are the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So this is really a partner-driven effort. It's kind of like our conservation implementation strategies, but in this case, the partner really takes the lead. So it's a group who already has the expertise, experience, and capacity to manage a partnership and to manage the projects, provide the outreach to producers, to quantify the benefits that we actually see on the ground. And in the past, this has required a 1-to-1 match on funding, but I think that that's changing. So there's a lot more money coming into this program through the Inflation Reduction Act and other ways. And folks were realizing that the 1-to-1 match might not actually be feasible. So it sounds like there's some flexibility in that. I forget when those come out. I think they've changed the cycle on it. I want to say it's maybe in June that those proposals are accepted for the following fiscal year. And then the conservation innovation grants are another option. There's both a national announcement and Oregon always has a state announcement. And those can include things like on-farm trials. And so the idea here is that we're demonstrating application of a new technology or method, something like that, that could be used in EQIP or other programs, or trying out something innovative. And those have various amounts of funding available. All right, so like I mentioned, the way that Oregon implements our EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, is through these local strategies. You can go onto our website and there's a map that, I don't know, it's a bit cluttered now. I think it's a little hard to navigate, but you can click on a point on the map and it'll pop up all of the strategies that are available in that area. And then you can kind of click into them to learn more about it. So the ones that we have currently, or that we had in the last fiscal year for the Waldport Field Office, included the Upper Yaquina Water Quality Strategy that was in Lincoln County, and it was our first year of that strategy this last year. And then the Siuslaw Floodplain Reconnection here in Lane County and down into Douglas County, and that was the first year for that one this year as well. The Forest Resistance and Resilience we've had around for, I think, about 5 years, and it's been extended again. And we were actually able to extend the focus area to a wider geography so that we can include more applications this year. Forest management planning is just kind of working with often new forest landowners to get them a forest management plan, a 10-year plan written by a professional forester that lays out all of the work that they want to do. And then once they have that in hand, they can work with us on actually getting funding to implement it. And the West Side Wildfire Recovery, this was our last year for that strategy. The one that was included in our area was the Echo Mountain Fire up near Otis in Lincoln County. And we did have one contract for that one last year. Okay, so just looking at a glance, what did our contracts look like? We had 17 EQIP applications. 12 of those I was able to fund for over $847,000 obligated. That was a lot more than my budget has been in the past. So it was a busy year, and we were able to take advantage of some of that funding from the Inflation Reduction Act and other areas. That included 4 forest management plans, 4 high tunnels, that one wildfire recovery contract that I mentioned, one new big project in the Siuslaw for floodplain reconnection, one EQIP CIC, and an organic transition initiative. That was that new program we had this year or last year. And CSP, we also had one application that I was able to fund in Lincoln County this year. So we'll dive into those a little bit more. The Siuslaw floodplain reconnection. This is a strategy that we worked very closely with the Siuslaw Coho Partnership. That's a group of organizations here, including the Watershed Council, the Soil and Water Conservation District, BLM Forest Service, the tribes,
Both
Siletz and CT-CLUC. Yeah, Mackenzie River Trust. So these are folks who've been working together for over 10 years. They were able to secure a really big grant from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board through their focused investment partnership. So they've got $12 million over 3 bienniums, so like 6 years, in these focused watersheds to implement on the ground restoration to benefit coho salmon habitat. And so we wanted to partner with that and bring some EQIP funding to help with some of these projects as well. So this just started last year, and we were able to do one contract down on 5 Mile Creek above Taconich Lake. So they're doing a very large wetland restoration floodplain. It's called a Stage 0 project, where basically you're resetting the floodplain, making the very incised creek come back up onto the floodplain and creating an amazing amount of habitat for coho and for a lot of other wildlife. It's been really exciting being part of that project. Forest management planning. So this is, like I said, allowing forest landowners to work with a technical service provider, a professional forester, to develop a forest management plan for them. We had 4 new contracts this last year. 1 was in Lincoln and 3 in Lane County. And I've got 5 applications for this year. So that continues to be a pretty popular program. And it's really great because once folks have that forest management plan in place, then it feeds in really well to our forest resistance and resilience funding strategy. So they can then say, okay, these are the practices, the activities that were prescribed, and now I would like some help implementing them. And that's what we're doing with this strategy. You can see this yellow area. I can't remember exactly where it used to cut off in the past, but it was very much more focused kind of around the Willamette Valley in the past, and we were able to expand that focus area. So we've got a lot more of the private forest lands in Lincoln and West Lane County that are now included. And we didn't have any contracts last year, but I do have 7 applications this year. And so we're hoping to be able to fund a good portion of those either through this strategy or through the extra money that we have through the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's kind of a lot of overlap with some of those practices, particularly tree planting.
So it's the yellow and red.
Mhm.
How did those areas get set or changed?
So I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't around when they did the initial prioritization area. The way we've been able to expand was just through our local work groups, really getting feedback from folks saying, hey, we have more of the same type of forest that's largely monoculture, overstocked, and could be susceptible to disease or pest outbreaks, drought, and wildfires. And so we wanted to be able to address that in a larger area. So these were some priority watersheds that were identified either on ODFW kind of priority areas, working with ODF and just with other folks, and also just having willing landowners who had applied and had a plan in place and were ready to implement. So that's a good argument for expanding. A new strategy that we have this year is the local foods and climate resiliency. And we've seen a pretty good interest in this so far. The goal here is to help increase food security and climate resiliency by addressing soil organic matter depletion, plant productivity and health, and habitat for wildlife and invertebrates, particularly pollinators, on farms that are selling or distributing produce to local markets. So it doesn't actually require sale. We want to be able to be inclusive of tribal gardens, community gardens, stuff like that. But folks who are somehow tied into the local food economy through farmers markets or farm stands or whatever. And there's a lot of practices that are included in that. Wallace is our, what's your title, Wallace?
Resource conservation for the
small farm specialist. So he kind of helped get this strategy going and has been real helpful working with some of our small farmers on getting plans together and getting this on the ground. Excited about this. And then, as I've mentioned, starting last year, we had a lot of new money coming in from the Inflation Reduction Act. There's 19.5 billion that's going to be coming to NRCS over 5 years nationally. And then that filters down through a number of programs. But the way that it's being offered this year for EQIP is kind of through different pools that are related to land use. So we've got a forest land, cropland, rangeland, pasture land, and then there's an energy and an animal operations pool. And these are for what has been designated as climate smart agriculture and forestry practices. So these are activities that will either deliver quantifiable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, so reducing energy use or greenhouse gas emissions, and then or increasing carbon sequestration. That's storing carbon either in the soil through improved soil health or in plants, trees, planting, hedgerows, forests, whatever. Okay, so then moving on to some of our national strategies, the High Tunnel Initiative continues to be a popular strategy or initiative. We had 4 contracts last year that were all in Lincoln County, and I've got 4 applications this year. I think this year, it looks like we're gonna be funding them probably through that local foods initiative. And then if there's extra funding left over, we might fund some extras. The organic initiative, we haven't had a whole lot of activity here in my area. We didn't have any contracts last year. I do have 1 application this year. And then the organic transition initiative, I mentioned this was a new one that just started last year. The idea here is that USDA runs the National Organic Program that certifies farms as organic. There's been a decline in new farms applying for certification or farms maintaining their certification. And so this was USDA's push to try to make it easier for folks who want to be certified organic and have had barriers for cost or, just the being able to put together the plan and keep the records and everything that they need to under the organic certification. And so this program kind of helps folks along during that transition period to becoming organic. And I think
Explain the high tunnel initiative. What's that mean? Like, what is high tunnel?
it's these greenhouses, hoop houses. Yeah, I don't know why they call them high tunnels. Most people call them hoop houses,
I
but
saw it on that page. What is high tunnel? It seems to contain a lot of invasive management as well. Invasive species management.
the high tunnel initiative, I think now they've taken most of the extra practices out of it, and it's mostly just the high tunnel and then whatever you'd need to do to make sure that it's not creating like an erosion hazard or something, like maybe doing some drainage or water management around it. But you can definitely incorporate other activities in there: cover cropping, crop rotation, mulching, other activities like that. But it's basically season extension, allowing, yeah.
What's the landowner match?
So the cost share on these, it depends on whether the producer is qualifies as historically underserved or not, but it's supposed to be like a 75% match for most folks, and then it might be closer to 90% for those who are historically underserved. It's always hard to know, like our prices that we pay don't always keep up with inflation. So we had a problem with that in the last couple of years where, cost of materials was skyrocketing and our payment rate kind of stayed the same. I think we've caught up now, so it does a pretty good job of covering most of the cost. Yep. The conservation incentive contracts, in our area, we're kind of focusing on pasture land for that. And that's trying to address soil quality issues, any kind of water quality from sediment or nutrients or pathogens going into streams, rivers, whatever, and degraded plant condition. So the contract that we did this last year includes some forage planting, weed management, and fencing, riparian fencing, and then prescribed grazing. So it allows the producer to move the livestock around and do a better job of managing to improve soil health and forage quality while protecting water quality. Conservation Stewardship Program, as I mentioned, these are the 5-year contracts. We've got 3 existing ones in Lane County. And then we had 1 new contract this last year in Lincoln County. It was pretty big, over 360 acres. And some of the activities that they included in this plan was a wildlife habitat management plan. They're very focused on providing wildlife habitat in their forest. And so then that included tree and shrub planting for wildlife. In particular, they were looking at beaver habitat. And so they wanted to do some more native willow and other shrub planting along one stream area to try to encourage beaver to come back in. They wanted to increase on-site carbon storage. So that kind of just included some different management into their forest management plan, the way they're retaining some wood, snags, and designating areas that are going to be essentially leave trees that they're not going to harvest. Cultural plantings, they've been working with the Siletz tribe on hazel plantings and then doing management so that they can harvest those materials. And then they're doing one area of snag creation for bats and other cavity nesting wildlife. So that's been pretty fun working with them on that. Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. We haven't had a whole lot of activity in this. There are 6 active contracts in Lincoln County and 6 in Lane. Mostly we don't have the, capacity to do much outreach and develop new plans. They're 10 or 15-year contracts, and it is sort of a temporary easement where there's restrictions on what activities are allowed within the planted area. The annual payment rates aren't great for our area, so I think it's been not a disincentive. It does end up covering most of the cost of the restoration, addressing the invasive species and planting native plants along the stream. So it is a good program. It's still available, but the Farm Service Agency is the one that oversees that application process and manages those contracts. And then the easement programs, Healthy Forest Reserve Program, we do have 4 active contracts here in West Lane County. This was a program that came out about 10 or 12 years ago. And the focus here in Oregon was northern spotted owl habitat and carbon sequestration. So these are working forests. They are still able to harvest within the sideboards of their easement, but it is a permanent easement, so it stays with the land in perpetuity. We've got over 680 acres that are protected through this easement program. There has been interest in, more of these, and we haven't had additional funding for them. I've heard some talk that our next farm bill might include new funding, either for this or some kind of related forest easement program, but we'll see what that looks like once the farm bill actually comes out. The wetland reserve easements, we have 2 current easements in this area down on the main stem Siuslaw and North Fork Siuslaw that are protecting over 380 acres in permanent easements. And we've been trying to do some outreach, working with our partners here and in Lincoln County. There's a lot of work in estuary restoration, and so we wanted to kind of tie into that and kind of make it available for folks to know that there are wetland reserve easement options. So I've produced a new flyer. They're out there in the back, and I can send out electronic copies, but it's just a 2-pager, pretty simple, trying to tell landowners what the wetland reserve easement program is and why they might be interested in that for tidal wetland restoration in our area. That's all I've got. Are there any questions now, or we can take questions later too? So so that one is different in that you get one big lump sum up front. It pays for the restoration, and the landowner gets a big check for the conservation easement, but then there's not like ongoing annual payments or anything like that. So it pays pretty well for the initial landowner. In some cases, that land has been passed on to new landowners, and the easement is already there, and they're not getting any more payments for it. So yeah, and we try to have those conversations with potential buyers, hopefully before they buy, to know what that means to have that easement on the property, and make sure that they understand the rules around it. But yeah.
Hey, Annie,
Yes.
can you repeat the questions that you're getting in the room? It's hard for us. We can hear you very loud and clear, but everyone else, it's kind of muted.
Okay.
Can hear rumblings, but it would help to.
All right, thanks. Okay, let's queue up. There we go.
Most of you already know me, but Seth Mead, Watershed Conservationist for the Siuslaw SWCD. I'm just gonna give a quick rundown of what we've been up to over the last couple of years. Are we here? There we go. All right, well, I threw our mission up there just so you know what we're supposed to be doing. We're basically to encourage and promote the responsible stewardship of our natural resources through technical assistance, the coordination and delivery of conservation programs, and natural resource education activities. Our main programs right now are basically watershed restoration and, basically looking for process-based restoration projects. We got agricultural water quality program where I'm working with ag landowners, either active or legacy ag lands, addressing water quality concerns. And then we have our education and outreach where we engage with the youth, try to foster a sense of stewardship. And we do have the means of invasive weed control, usually an integrated approach. To be honest, we're very active in the first two and much less active in the latter two. So I was just going to go through a couple of our bigger projects over the last few years. This is kind of an example of the watershed restoration stuff. This was a project that we had OWEB TA funds initially, got funding from a multitude of sources, and had basically everybody from the SVP involved in one way or another. Implemented over 2 in-water work periods, 2019 through 2020, and then all the follow-up planting and whatnot. The initial planting and all that ended in 2021. So there's our measurable objectives. Basically create a little over 10 acres of inset floodplain along a little less than half-mile stream. Placed 65 key pieces of conifer wood in McLeod for 0.2 stream miles, planted 17 acres of native veg, seeded 16, and then constructed the landowner's fence, the ones we took down in order to implement. And then just a couple shots of those planting and then hydro seeding the slope banks. Yellow is the riparian treatment areas, basically where we just site prepped and planted it. Blue is the floodplain inset and slope banks. Red was the fill for the first year. We blew all that on site. And there's the acres that go along with it, which accumulatively add up to what I already told you. I'm just going to go through a few pre and post implementation photos. So this is the top of the McLeod inset, from the top looking down pre-implementation, and what it looked like last July. So those banks before we went in there, they were anywhere from, let's say, 8 to 15 feet from top of bank to the scour depth. So in size, pretty significantly in size, but nothing like what we were dealing with on the North Fork Siuslaw, which exceeded like 20, 25 feet from top of bank to scour depth. So yeah, this is downstream or upstream looking down towards the North Fork. Here's the opposite, standing at the lower end of McLeod, looking up pre-implementation, and this last July. This is towards the mouth of McLeod, looking down the main stem Siuslaw. Notice the haggard eroding banks, and that's what it looks like last July. That slope bank on the far end. So during what you'll see is a bunch of these photos. They were like what I just showed you on McLeod. Those were done in 2019. So they have about a year head start on the veg establishment. And then the North Fork section we did in 2020. So the veg is a little bit behind the rest of it, but so far so good. Kind of the same spot looking down the old alcove towards the main stem Siuslaw. Pre-implementation, post 2023. Straight across the North Fork Siuslaw from a different site, a little bit lower on the project area. Okay, this is on the far side, looking back towards the confluence with McLeod. Pre-implementation, post. And yeah, so this one's interesting. So this is from the top of the fill area, looking across the first winter. So we've treated the McLeod Creek inset and the near side section of the North Fork, and obviously hadn't treated the opposite side, but that just gives you a good visual on what we were dealing with. I think going through, like, just looking at aerial photos, it was something like that bank was receding like, I think it was like 10 foot a year, or it was like 30 feet over the last 5 years. So it was actively eroding towards the county road. And we got in there where we still actually had enough room to work with, but it was getting tight. So that's, yeah, during that first winter. And then that's after we had treated the entire thing and what it looks like last July. Okay, so that's Bessie's, and that's out of our focus area. That's just within our general districts.
Quick question. Seth.
Yeah, go for it.
What was the decision made? Could you have done stage 0 there? And if so, what was like the decision to go from to do a stage 8 as opposed to a stage?
So the difference between a stage 0 and a stage 8 is a stage 0, you can do the full Monty and you don't have to basically take into account any of the existing infrastructure upstream or down. That one we had to, you're sandwiched in between private lands on all sides of you, except for the Forest Service on a couple corners, and then you have 2 different Lane County roads. So you basically adjust your relative elevation model according to, the downstream set of things. You basically can't negatively affect anybody. So we adjusted the designs according to that. And that's all the difference is between a stage 8 and a stage 0. So that's why. And so, yeah, so this is the yellows, maple, the blue is fiddle, and those are our 2 focus areas. There's 6 field hucks. Basically, we're supposed to be spending like 40% of our funding from the state addressing water quality concerns within those 2 basins. I threw this one in there just to show you, like, the green is Siuslaw National Forest. So the idea being that, in essence, we're coming off extensive anchor habitats, sanctuaries in essence, that have been managed for LSR for several decades now, and still providing high quality habitat. And basically the plan, at least in theory, was to, stitch it together, starting at tying right into the federal lands, those strongholds, and working our way downstream, hopefully mitigating. All these are section 303 delisted for temperature and sedimentation. And so in essence, tie into the strongholds and working our way downstream. Also threw this in there just to show you, basically we're doing a long-term, it's supposed to be a 20-year stream temperature study with ODA and DEQ to some degree. But anyways, in essence, we have loggers on the federal lands to basically give us a reference what the temperatures are coming off the really intact pieces, and then we have them strategically located throughout the basin to try to track where we're running into thermal issues. And obviously I've been a lot more active on fiddle. That was a little more background. Fiddle has been a focus area since 2013. Maple came on board like a couple years back. So we got a lot of buy-in on fiddle, a little buy-in so far with maple. Haven't made it quite that far. You can see there's a pretty extensive gap from the Forest Service to where I have basically willing landowners. I tried to get access, it wasn't happening. But anyways, those are all different hobo logger sites where we throw them out there spring, track, the summer into fall, and then pull them in the winter and provide them all to ODA and DEQ. In essence, hoping to, see if what we're doing is making a difference over the long haul. Okay, so this is Bear Creek. In essence, I'm just going to go through. So this is more like our ag water quality program. This is on private lands. And the blue is phase 1. In essence, we met with these landowners. They had been a long time anti, but they did have new land managers on board, landowners and land managers. So I've been cultivating that relationship for a while. And then right off the bat, in essence, we're like, well, just give me those little tribs that you see on the left there in blue. Let me do my thing on those. And if you're fine, comfortable, feel good about things, then we can, proceed. And so they gave me these 3 little tribs, A, B, and C, that weren't really cutting into their major grazing lands. And we placed large wood in the tribs, fenced them, and then planted them. And they liked how it went. So I continued greens, phase 2, which we did the same spectrum of treatments last year. And then phase 3 is the yellow, which we're in the middle of implementing right now. And that's just, those are like just representative shots of phase 1. And you notice the game fence, so that's 6.5 foot game wildlife fence. It's grazed heavily, but what happened, like initially I just fenced it with the livestock, wildlife friendly livestock design, where we just kept the cows out. And there was you couldn't even tell, like in a year you came back and the plants actually looked worse than they were, because they looked worse than they were when they were initially planted, because all that was really occurring was like, yeah, we kept the cows out, but the elk were just coming off the hill, and there's a heavy population in there. So initially we did a trial plot, and that's it on the top left. I was like, okay, I know the Forest Service is doing these game fencing things. I'm going to give this one a go. And within a year, it was night and day. Like we had a section of just barbed wire fence and whatnot up to it. Plants looked beat to whatever. And then you had this right off the side of it. So it was like the response was night and day. And in essence, in order to get stuff established out there, you have to do this. So it's expensive, but you do get the response you wanted in a matter of years. And so we're doing like a bunch of these big enclosures where, we plant them, maintain the plants, and fence them like that. And then we provide like wildlife gaps in essence, I have them strategically located to line up with the massive elk trails that are habitually used. So, and you can see like a top left, that enclosure ends right there. And there's a section, I think it's an 80-foot wildlife gap, where we exclude the cows, but it's a wildlife friendly design, and they jump it all the time anywhere, and the cows can go underneath it. So anyways, just examples of phase 1. And there's some of the in-stream shots of phase 1. So yeah. And then here's phase 2, which we did last year. So basically we just tied into where the downstream extent of phase 1 and went all the way down towards the mouth. Actually, we went a little further. We went past the confluence with Trib C, doing the same treatments. So those are measurable objectives from last year. And yeah, so it's really nice. Actually, we worked it out where they have, plantations right on the edge of the pasture. We just walk over there. I pick what pumpkins I want, have the excavator tip them, shake them, take them over the creek, and do a complex. So it's pretty handy and pretty streamlined, really. You don't have to waste too much time back and forth getting the trees from their source to the creek. Okay, so here's top of phase 2, looking downstream. Well, I have placed wood in it, but I haven't vegged or fenced it. That's the end product. Last spring, pre, post, pre again, post, and another. So that was phase 2. Through this on there, this is phase 3. Basically, this is from our SVA, our stream side veg assessment. In essence, we go through and you lay a 35-foot buffer on both sides of the creek, go through and assess the veg. As kind of a surrogate for temperature. The green is trees, all that orange you see is just grass. I think there isn't any bear on that, but I think yellow's bear. Yeah, so either bare ground or the orange is grass, and that's all largely what we are treating in phase 3. I might have missed up something there. Anyways, okay. This is not supposed to be, okay, somehow I deleted what I was doing. Okay, well anyways, phase 3, we're in the middle of implementing now. We did the large wood already, this last water work period, and now we're going through and fencing that entire reach in the same series of enclosures and wildlife friendly barbed wire fence, but wildlife friendly design. Okay, and so the other one, I did this for Grant, just to show that we are a little active in Maple. This is a trib to Maple. So little background, in essence, we implemented this, the in-water work period 2016, and then planted it the following winter and spring. So those are the measurable objectives. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so this is the downstream end looking up through the floodplain area. Pre-implementation, obviously, just a mat of reed canary. That's after we had placed all the wood and went through, site prepped it and vegged it spring 2017. So, I mean, basically it was a massive willow staking effort.
What's the spacing on those ones?
It's either, I want to say it's 5 and 3 or 10 and 2.
Yeah.
So it's something like that. It's pretty thick. But I hate plant protection. I will never waste money on like plastic tubes again. So my take on all that is flood it and you'll have a natural amount of mortality. And if not, well, the beaver will come take care of it for you. So that's at the very, right after it was planted, spring 2017. That's what it looked like. August 2018. So it was really wet and the veg exploded almost immediately. Awesome. Everything's coming together, doing exactly what we want. So we got the exact response we wanted. We got the beaver to move in. They were already there, but they were always building like these little joker mud dams that were, like 6 inches high or something, not providing much habitat value, and they'd blow out obviously annually. Well, we provided such prime habitat that he decided to, go gangbusters in there, and it was too much of a good thing in essence. It's awesome because you have all that prime aquatic habitat upstream, but what it was becoming a maintenance issue because this was when it was still okay, but the beaver was an industrial one. He kept adding to it, and all of a sudden, we're having basically water on the edge of an asphalted road all year. This is during the summer. This is in like late July, August. He built it up so much that it's topping main stem Maple Creek Road. Obviously, there's a bunch of households. This is their sole means of access. It's freaking me out because it's a co-host system, and we were basically, our hands were tied because we were working through the permitting process for a pond leveler with ODF and W. But in the meantime, what was happening is the county was out there like every week. They'd scalp it, take a little bit off the top to get it to a livable height. And it was within a day or two. He's like, oh, fine, you took a foot off, I'll add 2. And it was just ongoing forever. And so I worked with the county, ODF and W, and the landowners were really, really patient with us because it took over a year to get it. We worked with Jacob Shockey from Beaver State Wildlife Solutions, and we actually ended up building 2 different pond levelers because to address this spot, and then in the meantime, while we were getting this permitted, the beaver colony decided to move upstream as well, and they built a valley-wide dam that they had it like perfectly placed where, in essence, it was backing the water up into the landowner's garden. And so not only were we ruffling feathers on the lower end, the landowners, who are about as user-friendly as it gets, were even like, oh, we got to do something because, we can't even grow our food anymore. So anyways, worked through all that, got everything permitted to build these 2 things this last year. And then it's set at an elevation where we get our desired end product. We have the aquatic habitat value. We basically have the water at an elevation where it's livable and it's still providing lots of wildlife and fish and wildlife habitat, but it's not inundating their garden and not topping Maple Creek Road in the middle of summer. So stoked to finally get both of these in place. It wasn't easy. Wasn't. I mean, in essence, ODF and W is trying to get their permitting stuff a little more streamlined. But as of right now, as far as I know, it's still by case basis, so,
Is
but,
that-
yeah.
How much maintenance do you think there might have to be done on that system in the near future?
So we have Jacob on contract to maintain these for the next 2 years. And usually he was saying, depends on the level of flow and whatnot. This is really low gradient. I don't anticipate it being too crazy. But there most definitely will be maintenance. So basically I'll stop in and check on it. The landowners live right there and the county is pretty vocal if there's any issues. So yeah, I do expect, and we'll see. I'll be curious on the longevity of these too, but it is a good balance, where we're getting, everybody's happy, so.
Is this, has it been done quite a bit in other areas?
It hasn't, like, in essence, Jacob did a few of these on coho bearing streams before ODF&W caught on to him, and then once they figured out what was going on, they were like, stop. And they had to go through a great big rigmarole to get everything figured out. It was an interesting scenario because ODF&W recommended me get a hold of this guy, work with this guy. Great, I got to get some guy from the far corner of the state to come tell me what's up. But it was worth it but it was interesting because at that point, ODF&W and Jacob were basically going head to head, arguing over all this, and they finally did work through all that and got their it's not, they don't have a programmatic yet, but they do have like a best management practice, like a guidebook that you can work through. And so after took the fish passage coordinator Abke was having issues for a long time, and then finally Spangler and their recently appointed beaver specialist came out to the site and like, it's a no-brainer, we without it, the project isn't really providing, the habitat value we want. With it, it is. So let's do it. And once we got them on board, then it happened probably about a month later, and we were able to get in there, I think last August. So anyways, probably past my time, but those are just, shots of them in place. And that's all I got for you. So, yeah.
I have a question, the McLeod project.
Yeah.
When you were seeding, were you finding that the availability of native seeds were meeting your requirements to do that? And were you able to get like genetically appropriate sources? So I guess I'm wondering, thinking about out here on the coast. So I work in the valley with Susie on easements, and we have really good producers. And you can get a whole suite of seeds for native species, forests, grasses, whatever. So I'm wondering what that availability is out here on the coast. And this is also a question to you, Annie, right? You do this work too. But looking ahead, should we get more interest in easements out here and there's restoration that needs to be done? What does that look like? What are those challenges that might be faced? And is there a way that NRCS or Watershed Council could help prop up, stand up with seed producers?
Well, I'll answer from my experience. I haven't had issues. That being said, none of them are coastal. They're all from the bow. The big producers that I've worked. I know there's a Pacific Northwest Natives, I think. And then that other guy. Space River Refuge Seed Company. Yep, those two. I do use a bit, but they always have a plethora to choose from. And I kind of, for the rapid re-veg stuff, like the hydro seeding that I'm doing, usually those are, largely a cover crop before it goes underwater. And so, that's kind of like blue wild rice, Sitka brome, and then there's an oat. I can never remember the exact name for it. Maybe that's what it is. But they germinate pretty fast for natives. And we have worked in other ones for like when all that came and went, then we went out there and hand seeded some of the floodplain stuff, which is more aquatics. But I haven't had issues finding them, but it's always, the more the merrier, because it can be expensive, like really expensive depending on your seed mix, which I'm sure you know. But yeah, so I think there's room to improve our spectrum of vendors.
So you're really getting a handle on the regenerative grass?
Where we can flood it out, but it's funny, so Grant Creek is a perfect example. Like, where the beaver has backed stuff up enough that we can, but if it's there, you're gonna have some percentage of it, even if you do everything you want. A lot of my re-veg stuff happens in the coastal lakes, and those are municipal water supplies. And so I don't use any herbicide on any of those. Where I can, we use more of an integrated approach, but I won't say we haven't like eliminated re-canaring, but we have been able to establish plants and get stuff over it, and that's a plus, so I have been successful in that. But it's, yeah, a problem, and hard to work through, especially if it's been there for a long time and the thatch layer is really thick. It's, hard to plan.
Yeah, we're working with Coquille Watershed on one of our easements right now. We're taking it to they're taking it to its stage 0. So. we'll see how that
If it's wet,
goes.
then you'll do good. Then the willows can blow up. In essence, anytime that they have their feet wet, like all year, they're gonna go crazy. And so I've been lucky in that sense that almost all my stuff out in the coastal lakes is rather wet. They might be in size, but if you play with it a little bit, you can get it to a point where our natives can compete. You good?
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah.
Kelsey, there is a, coastal native seed,
Oh, yeah.
native plant network.
I know, the CNSCP, I can't even remember.
I can't
but
even
yeah.
remember. I call it the
Coastal
seed
Seed
co-op,
Native,
but I know
yeah.
that's not quite the right name.
Yeah,
That, the Institute for Applied Ecology has been kind of hosting. It's been around for a couple years now, and they've been working with a lot of the local partners on the central, well, all up and down the coast,
Yeah,
really,
but it
trying
is
to look at,
coastal, yeah, so.
Yeah,
it's-
look at
they
what
are
the
trying.
needs, what the needs are, what's available, and trying to actually do the wild collections if it's needed, work with producers to get more seed in production.
Yeah, I'm aware of, some efforts,
It's slow.
to create genetically appropriate seed stock for different micro regions across the state. I guess I was just wondering, like, I haven't really spoken to many people who've done implementation, so currently is that those industries standing up to the main.
Not coastal.
Yeah.
It's not
First person perspective on that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I would say I'm using, Valley stuff, Valley Genetics, because it's all that I really have available. That partnership you just mentioned, they've kicked out a few years of stuff, but it's low and it's kind of very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyways, there's definitely a need for that if we had the means of blowing up a bunch of coastal, genetics. They're just,
it's just so hard to figure out the supply and
Yeah, where do we
demand,
go?
and
I mean,
like,
yeah, it's just anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a need for more coastal specific G.
So, oh, that's not what I wanted, sorry. Scooch forward here. I don't know how we're doing on time. Lauren, can you kind of help me keep track?
Yeah, we're running a little behind.
Okay,
It looks like the
Um,
brief update on other USDA programs that you're about to start was going to kick off at 10:45, so about
Okay.
15 minutes behind.
okay, I'm gonna skip this.
Sorry.
There's not really much to talk about there. There are other programs offered by other, our sister agencies, Farm Service and Rural Development, but you can ask them more about those or ask me later. So just thinking about, looking forward, as I mentioned, we have a long range plan. There's a copy of it in the back if anybody's interested, or I can send out digital copies. It was updated sort of in 2020. It's supposed to be a 5-year plan, so we're kind of due for another update. And I just wanted to show what our major issues that were identified in that plan and see if there's any glaring omissions, any kind of shifts, ideas that folks have of what other things we might want to include. So water quality is, one of the major ones, and that includes both sediment, temperature, nutrients, and aquatic habitat. We've got a lot of impaired streams for any combination of these factors in our area, and that's been something that the Watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts and NRCS have been working on for many years. Forest, yeah,
I've got a comment about that I need to throw out into the room, in that the regulatory agencies do not want to recognize by doing monitoring, funding for monitoring, or anything that will show at the alkalinity in our streams. Because they know that if they do that, then a lot of the pollutants that get into the stream will have greatly increased toxicity. And that will make a mess out of the S3D. So that's the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned, after 40 years of assessing water quality around here. That always gets neglected to be understood by all of the practitioners. In, and how we do our work. And to me, it's a huge threat in limiting the beneficial uses and the salmon recovery. That we all really ought to be aware of, that almost all of our water is far lower in alkalinity, which makes the toxicology shoot way up. And the regulatory agencies are definitely fear of understanding that. So, rather than making it all a public big hoodoo around it, is that all of us should be aware of that and understand that we're working under conditions that don't allow us to properly assess water quality because of that lack of data and the lack of any regulatory funding to find out about that, to establish that that's the case. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth after 40 years of what is the biggest priority and the biggest bang for the buck that we could do for conservation for salmon across Western Oregon, is to know what the landscape looks like for alkalinity levels. But it isn't allowed, it isn't funded, so we all have to keep it in the back of our minds that it is a big issue.
yeah, thanks for that. So I don't know if folks online were able to hear that, but Ray was just pointing out that there hasn't been funding for monitoring of alkalinity levels in our streams and the impacts that has on toxicology and habitability for salmon and other species. I think that's a great point. It's definitely something I'll add to our long range plan. NRCS has been asking us to report on what we think our deliverables are going to be on a lot of these projects, what our actual outcomes are, and wanting that kind of measurable, before and after, but we don't fund it. So we've relied on watershed councils and other partner groups to actually fund the monitoring, which I think there's really a lack of funding for it, and especially for long-term monitoring, that you need to see the trends over decades.
Want to allocate for that, it won't get through
It doesn't,
DEQ.
yeah. So that's a good point. Any others off the top of your head we're missing there? I did have a question, which we can do or skip depending on what y'all think. If you could get one thing funded or accomplished by NRCS in the next year, what would it be? What would you like? What would be your top priority for us to focus on? You can go around the room, or folks can raise their hands if you have any ideas you wanted to share.
One thing I'd be curious about, I did look at your recent flyer on the wetland stuff, and to me, when I read it, there's multiple sites that I've done on private land that like, I don't see how we can qualify for that. Like if the landowner was interested in enrolling the piece that was already treated, which right off the bat, it says something like, are you a landowner that has these things? Would you, and okay, yeah, now that we've treated it, they have those. So. I'd like to know, like, I could come up with a handful of sites for those floodplain projects. Where are those, like, could the landowner enroll those, the treated piece in those?
Susie?
I mean, we'd have to go through that process, but yeah, I mean, what we're doing is trying to restore, agricultural land back to wetland.
Mhm.
So that's that focus there. So I mean, if you've already treated it, you've already treated. So those would not, qualify.
Okay, well, let me rephrase then.
Okay.
If that isn't, I'm curious, I would like to know. A easement program that compensates landowners or at least secures them for the long term. Like for treated site, let's say like Grand Creek,
Mhm.
if Carol wanted to, and which he was supposed to initially. If he wanted to enroll that in a conservation easement, what's the best fit there? Depending, I mean, obviously it's a wetland, it's a flooded wetland now. Another one would be Bessie's inset stuff, so. Those kind of, I'd be curious, obviously I know it's a case by case basis, but those treated lands that are on private. I have had people like, go, well, are they getting compensated for that? Is there any way they could get compensated for that? Could we at least put it in the long, secured for the long term? So if they do sell it, some halfwit doesn't go in there and gut it, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I do worry about the stuff that I do on private lands going by the wayside with just a quick sign of the pen and somebody else owning it,
Right.
And I know that the landowners themselves, like Erica's talked about that, and she's so back and forth on whether or not she wants to stay or not, like I was, I want to make sure that's golden before it changes hands.
Right.
And somebody else that's anti takes over.
Yeah,
So, and then I have a couple other ones coming up that I'm curious about, like the Scott one that I'm doing with Fiddle. Anyways, so similar cases that I'm just.
yeah, and I think CREP is kind of the same thing. It's supposed to be degraded land that you're restoring, so I don't know if there's an option there for,
Land trust,
So talk to McKenzie River. Trail.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
okay. Any other thoughts?
We have 2 comments online.
Great, thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, so David Waltz from DEQ, his comment is water quality issues, recommended adding cyanobacteria, HABs, drinking water in coastal lakes.
Mhm.
And then
Thank
Heather,
you.
and second comment in the chat is from Heather Medina Salceda. Is the Mackenzie or other land trusts working to address Seth's question for easements on wetlands?
Eli's. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty helpful.
Yeah, they're pretty actively involved in the Siuslaw Coho partnership, and I
Yeah,
think they've been talking to some
Yeah, McKenzie River
landowners.
Trust's been fun.
Yeah,
I'd
right.
like to second that about the cyanobacteria problems on coastal lakes. And sometimes we're right here in Lake Creek, we're doing potholes that turn different colors in the summer, and pick them down and put their kids on, but it's warm water like everybody else will swim. Well, there's a lot of toxins that can come from bacteria, and we've got a big problem down at Silkies and with algal blooms that occur very regularly, and anything we can do to promote monitoring of that and education we can do to land. There are a lot of landowners around the lake that draw drinking water out of there. A lot of that is recorded and a lot of it isn't. So just educating those folks that they could be having potential problems from that is something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And if I can add, I think currently it's the Oregon Health Authority is the entity that would actually come out and test that if there was enough of a public concern for that, especially if it is in like a drinking water supply, but I don't know that process and how available they are to do like the test,
Yeah, there is some.
But that would be the entity with contact.
Yeah, and he, David Waltz is having for reporting that or getting into it, and they're working together with the health authority to get some signage and whatnot, better knowledge of how. But yeah, it's an important issue.
It looks like David has his hand raised now.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, David?
Hi, a bit of a delay there on the Zoom. So, yeah, I threw that in there because, for two reasons. One is, on the slide, it asked about major water quality issues, and I think, really sediment nutrients, are, factors in harmful algae blooms anyway, so it's not really a different issue. And then on the second part, if you could get only one thing funded or accomplished by NRCS, I'd say just keep on the riparian and, filtration, near stream type projects, because it's such a cumulative thing. And just using Silkus as an example is, the work that we did with Portland State over a decade, well, 15 years now, sorry, suggested that the major nutrient load, or phosphorus load in particular, that gets to at least Silkus is from the watershed, and it's principally sediment borne. Certainly the development around the lake is still a concern for failing septic systems and that kind of thing. But by and large, on an annual basis, the load is from the watershed. So anything Seth can do to trap that sediment, it's a good thing. And then just one final comment on the monitoring it, for the cyanobacteria and, at the lakes, is that, yes, we do work with OHA. There is virtually no funding, either through them or through us. We run the analysis when OHA says, yes, we, can approve you to do the sampling and analysis. So I stay in touch with the folks out at Silkus, the Dune City folks and the local water quality volunteers. But we've just never been able, after, again, 15 years plus of trying, we've never been able to establish a cooperative monitoring program that includes, the local partners, is funded, has sustainable funding. Whether it's Silkus, Wohink, Tack and Hitch, 10 Mile, any of those, just to have a sustainable funding. They've just not been able to secure that. We'll keep trying. Thanks.
No. All right, thanks for that, David. Mike, you have your hand up too?
Yeah, just kind of something possibly to add into the forest health description there too, is it relates to it, but more of the fire resiliency mitigation type work. If anything, the last few years has shown us is that, yes, the coastal forest can burn. In fact, we had an acre and a half fire on our Tackinich property last summer that thankfully was spotted early and attacked quickly. It didn't blow up like some of the other areas did. So, but kind of focusing in on that too as a possibility.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you look at the fire risk maps, and pretty much the whole coast range is blue, it says low probability, but you get the right conditions and we definitely get serious fires here. And that's something that folks are worried about. And I think we need to make sure that we're addressing.
I would second that, what Mike said, just because, what I see during, what was it? But
2020,
we've had a couple really dry ones, and that map that you showed on that, this looked interesting, like it followed the main stem or something. Like it wasn't the watersheds themselves, it was mainly like right along.
Because that's where the private forest land is. You get up and
But the checkerboard wasn't lit up, none of the stuff was, anyways. The map looked interesting to me.
okay, I can definitely,
And I
we
would
can
just,
look at that
you know,
for
I think it gets.
next year and see if
Like you're
there's,
saying, the east side is obviously the priority, but
Yeah.
as you start from like the valley and work your way to like Indian, Deadwood, those places
Uh-huh.
get crispy.
Uh-huh.
And then even ours, get there at some point, so
Yeah.
I understand the priorities being where they are.
Yeah.
But I would say, like kind of what Mike was saying,
Mhm.
it wouldn't hurt. Especially with the way things are changing.
Yeah, you get more drought years. and-
Totally.
Yeah.
On that, is part of that, like, working with, doing like prescribed burning stuff, like tribal burns, or, you know, like anything like that. Does that go under forest health?
It can, yeah, we haven't, I don't think that's been included in the forest resistance and resilience strategy so far, but they're starting. I know over in the Willamette Valley, they're starting to use some more prescribed fire. I haven't seen it much here on the coast yet,
Yeah,
but
further south. it's
yeah,
super common,
yeah,
so
down
it
in
might be a good thing for
Southwest for sure.
consider adding or
Mhm.
thinking about in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, like, you know, oh, well, good, if we identify, first, of course, have to identify the areas that are priority, but then what does implementation look like? Are there not only good prescriptions for that, but then is there resources here on the coast, meaning personnel and equipment that could actually implement that? Provided all, you know, all dominoes fall in place.
right. And I don't think we
You
have
know,
that here yet,
You know,
but
what does that look like, you know, is fire risk increasing faster than our capacity to address it?
yes, definitely.
I think you'd have a
You know,
better
how do you
spec.
fix that, you know, how do you move forward?
I don't think there's a shortage of forestry contractors around here, to be honest. When you come into the massive floodplain excavations, that's where we're having a bottleneck on worthy contractors.
Yeah.
Everyone and their brothers worked in forestry for a long time around here, so there's quite the contracting pool when it comes to the forestry side of things. Now, you're obviously only gonna accomplish so much a year, but I think we could get some stuff accomplished there. It might just be different treatments than what they're used to, yeah. But
Yeah.
I've worked with a few, well, and then all the Forest Service stewardship contracts, those are largely similar practices.
Right.
So anyways.
Yeah.
There's some, well, you know,
Yeah.
some of a pool there.
Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
But just to focus on, local food production, I think is super important.
Oh, good.
For the future of
Yeah.
this region.
I'm just gonna skip this. I did want to just mention this, which I think I brought to the local work group last week or last year. And we haven't made a whole lot of progress. We've had some more conversations. It's really, the idea is that Washington NRCS has been doing for maybe the last 10 years, maybe a little longer, some work with a local partner called Puget Sound Restoration Fund on restoration of the native Olympia oyster. There's potential for doing something like that here in Oregon, and we're just sort of still at the exploration stage of seeing if there are interested partners who kind of want to lead the effort, if there are enough interested participants who would qualify for NRCS funding to do this, meaning either shellfish producers or nonprofits or tribes who either own or could secure leases on land where they could implement this restoration. And in Washington, they've actually been pretty innovative, working even on county and state land where the nonprofit was able to secure a conservation lease in order to do the restoration. The county, whoever it was willing to, you know, give up their mudflats for this restoration, working with that partnership. So there's kind of some interesting stuff that could happen there, but we kind of need somebody who wants to lead the charge. There's a lot of great knowledgeable folks who have been working on this for over, you know, the last couple of decades in Oregon, but it's been challenging, I think. And, you know, there've been some successes and lots of learning experiences of where stuff just gets sedimented over or whatever. But if folks are interested, I'm willing to keep on helping facilitate these conversations and see if we could move this forward. It could be a good, yeah.
I was just gonna say, Heather dropped a comment in the chat. A few organizations around the county have RCPPs for oyster work.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I meant
so,
country, sorry, around the country.
Yeah.
Not gonna-
So there's other states, I think on the East Coast that have done RCPPs for this. And that just relies on getting some other funding sources and one organization who really wants to be the one to take charge and kind of organize the whole thing, but there's definitely potential for it.
I mean, it's awesome. I just don't know.
Yeah,
And then be interesting with, there's just so many different layers on that one. I would think Yaquina would probably be the best bet, just because you
Yeah.
have OSU, NOAA, ODF and W, and then you have
Mhm.
Hatfield, who has an aquaculture system. and
Right.
You have those other vendors there.
Right.
But, and maybe, those would be the people that propagate them or something, and then we have
Yeah.
to find ideal habitats, but there'd be the property, the land ownership on that could get interesting. I don't know. Like,
Right.
can you use those funds on national forest lands
well, that's where
or
you,
like territory? It's,
you
yeah,
could
that's where it's
potentially, as
going.
long as you had a producer
Okay.
that has a lease on that federal, state, whatever land to do the implementation.
Anyways, there's lots of layers to that one.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I don't know, Dan, could be, I'm too busy to lead the charge, but
And that's
it
kind of,
sounds
I
awesome.
feel like we've seen interest from, Mid-Coast Watershed Council definitely too, and other folks. Mike, did you want to add a comment here?
Yeah, no, Stan's been working with Oregon Oyster on their leases in Yaquina Bay to try to work on some of this too. But yeah, it would be, I'd hate to just say Stan will lead the charge, but I'm sure
Sign him
he'd
up
be-
since he's
I'm
not
sure
here.
he'd be interested in participating for sure.
Yeah. Great.
The restored oyster bed good for salmon habitat as well?
Yeah, they can provide habitat for a lot of other stuff. There's always trade-offs though, and I don't know enough about that science to know what those trade-offs are. There are definitely people who've been studying it and would have more information about that. But yeah, in these estuary habitats, there's a lot of, I don't know, baby crabs and all sorts of other stuff that need different types of habitats. So I think you could see multiple benefits from restoring these. I mean, historically, there were huge native oyster beds in the, Quina and other spots, but David, did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I can't help but just mention what some of the fishery scientists have told me about Yaquina Bay, and it can hold true for a lot of them, is that, those bays have been sort of physically transformed by dredging. And I think there's another big dredging project planned for the port of Yaquina. So, before you throw a lot of resources into that one, certainly there could be opportunities in other areas. But yeah, they've warned me, that it's just, these are transformed systems in some ways, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've seen our native oysters here and there, but they're always in the intertidal on like rocky reef.
Yeah.
So it's like that's, and they were surprises when I found.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, be curious and all that.
Ray?
I've heard that one consideration for some of the estuaries and bays on Oregon coast are the volume of fresh water that rides out on top of the salt water.
Uh-huh.
And that you have to be really careful about the salinity involved with where you site that kind of work.
Right. Yeah. David? Oh,
I think
That's
his
it.
hand was just up from earlier. Andy, we
Okay.
have 6 minutes left.
okay. So this is something that, probably isn't going to happen this year. Definitely isn't going to happen this year, but is still in discussion. We'll see where we can go with it. So if anybody has anything else that they wanted to share, we have 6 minutes left. We'd love to hear from anyone on other updates or projects you're working on, anything else. Or online. Mhm.
Well, I'm really excited about the outreach document you used for the WRE program. I'm really excited to see what sort of feedback we get on the Central Coast here. And enrolling some of those fluvial and private wetlands, estuarine wetlands. That's kind of exciting. See it that
Yeah.
that interest grows. So, just want to say thank you.
Yeah. It only took me a year to get it together. I finally did.
Say thank you as well. It's just our partnership. People have reached out to you for equip, and then they've also wanted restoration projects done, and so we kind of had a good synergy there going.
Yeah, it's really exciting seeing some of those projects coming together.
They Find out about equip, that they have some help, and they go, oh, we can also restore the river too. So
Mhm.
it's been a good partnership.
Yeah, that's really, I think, ideal for us to be able to, yeah, focus on some of the stuff that we're good at and then defer to Watershed Council and other partners where you guys can really shine.
Watershed Council turning a grant of Tahoe Creek, working with Annie for a large wood project just a week or two ago. And
Yeah.
another Potential project of Devon Creek area that came through these programs, so. Great.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see. All right, I think that's it. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate this discussion. I will make this recording available online. Sometimes it takes a little while to get it up there, and we'll have notes for follow-up, but definitely feel free to reach out to me too anytime during the year about any of this stuff. We're kind of constantly working on updating the long range plan, but thinking about ways to tweak the current projects that we have, like the focus area for the forestry. That's really good to hear, and that's something that I can look at before our renewals for next year. Yeah. All right.
Good work.
Thank you all.
Thank you.